Hello and welcome to Sunday Night Conversations. I'm your host, Michael Patrick Rooney, a show brought to you by D1Baseball.com. I want to say thank you to our presenting sponsor, Netting Pros. Netting Pros specializes in the design, fabrication, and installation of custom netting and padding for college baseball programs all around the country. Next time your field or facility needs something new, whether that's netting, wall padding, L screens, ball carts, you name it, make sure you check out our friends at Netting Pros. We will see them at the convention. These guys are awesome. Their products are awesome. They love college baseball. If you have needs in this area, this is a no-brainer. These guys will take great care of you, and they just absolutely love the sport. So welcome. This is the last Sunday Night Conversation of this fall. It's year 3. If you've not listened before, a couple years ago, we spent the whole fall talking to the volunteer coaches in college baseball, really trying to learn about the next wave of great coaches in our sport. Last year, we just did some fun stuff around themes like pitching, hitting, catching, etc. This year, I've just gotten totally selfish and off the rails, and I'm just trying to think of fun themes that that I'm really interested in. And this is a perfect bookend because the very first show we did this fall, we talked to Blair DeBoard and Ross Kivett and Mike Clement, who were all part of the 2013 Kansas State team that won the Big 12. It was the only time they'd ever won the conference, and they pushed Oregon State, Michael Conforto's Oregon State team in an epic super regional. Just a really fun team. Blair DeBoard is a future Power 5, Power 4, whatever it is, athletic director. He's a stud. Mike Clements at Ole Miss, Ross Kivett, at Houston. And so this is a great opportunity, too, to talk to Skylar Meade, who's the head coach at Troy, Jimmy Belanger, who's the pitching coach at Clemson, because these guys were on the 2007 Louisville team that went to the College World Series. Now, why is that significant? This is going to be a little dramatic when I say it, but I mean this. Like, that team changed the next 15 years of college baseball because Louisville went from a program. I don't want to be harsh or inaccurate, but Louisville was not on the national radar in college baseball. They just weren't. And then they've been on the radar ever since in a big, big way. Louisville was, when Dan McDonald took over Louisville, they'd made one NCAA tournament before, 2002, under Coach Prado. I almost feel like hiring Coach Prado was the most famous thing Louisville had done because he had won 2 national titles at Tampa as a Division II head coach. And so for a school to go from one NCAA tournament appearance ever in school history to now under Dan McDonald, Louisville has won, they've been to the College World Series 5 times. What's crazy, even crazier about Skylar and Jimmy's team, 2007 Louisville, is that was Mac's first year. Like, who takes over a program that's not on the map and then goes to Omaha in the first year? The answer is no one does that. Like, that doesn't happen. So anyway, I am super pumped for this. I've got a million questions for you guys. This is going to be super fun. So Skylar, let me start with you. Let's have you guys just introduce yourself and bullet point us around your baseball life. Where'd you grow up? Where'd you play? And then where have you coached since?
Well, I grew up in Louisville, Kentucky. I'm growing up as big of a Louisville fan. I know Jimmy knows this, as probably anybody that's ever donned a uniform there. I could tell you just about every score from every football and basketball game since I was born in 1984 and before that as well. And so grew up in Louisville, went to Louisville Ballard High School, was recruited by Coach Mundorf and Coach Prado to play there. And I was actually there 5 years. I'd gotten hurt in 2005 and ended up actually missing 2 years essentially and got to come back. Jimmy and I got to play together that 1 year for that 2007 ride that you mentioned. So, of course, our team did what our team did, and we got to have a lot of great experience with that. And then about 12 days out of playing in Omaha, I started my coaching journey at Eastern Illinois University. I got an opportunity to be a pitching coach and second assistant there at 22 years old, and was there for 5 years. Went on to Middle Tennessee State for a couple years, worked at Michigan State. Jimmy and I got to battle against each other during, the Maryland and Michigan State in the Big Ten times. And then Jimmy had gone on to the SEC and always told me how much fun it was. And then I got to fortunately go in the fall of 2017 to work for Coach Kingston at University of South Carolina. I was there 4 years. And then, something you work for, at least with the goals that I had in mind, in July of 2021, became the head coach here at Troy. And it's been a fun 2 years and hopefully a lot of great things to come.
All right. So Skylar, a couple of follow-up questions. Just in case our good friend Chris Burke is listening, to me, if you're an elite athlete in the Louisville area, you go to Louisville Ballard High, right? Like that's where if you want to be a pro athlete, that's where you go. If maybe you're not of that ilk, maybe you just want to have a nice experience, you might go to like a St. X, go Tigers. I just had to throw that zinger in there. But I all kidding aside, Skylar, I feel like Ballard's had like a million pro athletes. Like, was there any like super famous dudes that were there when you were there?
So Jeremy Sowers was a 2-time first-round pick. He was a high school teammate of mine for 3 years. Best man in my wedding, best man in his wedding. Sean Kelly was a guy who actually didn't even get to play much in high school. He ended up playing in the big leagues for 11 years that I played with. We grew up together. He spent a great amount of time. But, I mean, we've had it in a million sports. My freshman year, just in high school, we were finished number 1 in the country in hoops, had multiple, D1 guys. Allen Houston, Jeff Lamp, Devontae Parker in the NFL, Joe Adele. There's a multitude of great athletes that have come through there.
How about who's your favorite Louisville basketball player all time? Say Milt Wagner.
Ooh. So I wore number 20 because I did like Milt Wagner, and he was very famous in my household. But my favorite player of all time is really easy. It was a guy named DeJuan Wheat. He played there 1993-97. Was a superstar, went to Ballard High School, ended up playing in the NBA, another Ballard guy. And I just emulated everything I did in basketball off that guy. I thought he was the coolest player ever. I didn't know basketball could exist after he graduated in 97, but by far my favorite one.
So were you obviously pitched in high school. So you and Jeremy Sowers are like just taking on Kentucky high school teams. Like I would imagine you guys didn't lose for like a couple years.
Well, it's funny, so obviously I got to do my fair share of pitching and playing. Jeremy was a heck of a player and pitcher. Tyler Shrout, who's the pitching coach at Samford, was one of our best pitchers. He ended up, winning a zillion games during his time. Jeremy's brother, Josh, who went to Yale, was a 9th rounder. There was a multitude of really good players, both before and after.
Oh, that's awesome. All right, so Jimmy, you were not born into Louisville, the University of Louisville. Go ahead, give us your bullet points, Jimmy.
Yeah, so I grew up on Long Island, and went to North Babylon High School on the South Shore of Long Island. All my family's still there, and I actually went to junior college before I went to Louisville. So I was at Cecil College in Maryland for really 2.5 years, and it was when you could do the mid-year transfer. So I actually mid-year transferred into Louisville before that 07 season.
Oh my
so
gosh.
I came flying in like a bat out of hell. So did that, and then obviously spent that junior year there, and then I had one more year. So 08 was my last year playing, and then kind of like Skylar, I didn't get a chance to play pro ball, but after I got done playing, I coached the team that I grew up playing for, and it was a big team in the Northeast. It was called the Bayside Yankees. So I went and coached them that summer, and then Matt called me and asked me if I wanted to come back and be a student assistant because I had to finish my degree. So I got the opportunity to go back my last year and be a student assistant coach. And then just like Skylar, at the age of 22, I was fortunate to get a second assistant job at Monmouth, where I was running my own pitching staff. And probably like Skylar, I had a guy on my staff I was 3 months older than at the time. But I spent 3 years at Monmouth, went to the University of Maryland. We spent 4 years there and bounced around between Kentucky, Florida State, and then now at Clemson.
That's awesome. Who is the Bayside Yankees guy? Mark, owned a limo service?
Mark Cassetta.
Mark Cassetta. Oh my gosh.
Yeah,
You'd call him about players and he'd be in his limo the best.
Yeah.
He's the best. So was Chuck Ristano, did he coach at Monmouth before you? Did he have a run at Monmouth too, Jimmy?
Yeah. So I took over when Chuck left. Chuck went to Temple, and then I came in, and actually the assistant when I was there for one day was Ty McGahee. So it was me and Ty McGahee, and then Ty left the day I got hired and went to Auburn, and then we hired Carl Nunemaker. So it was me and Carl Nunemaker for a few years at Monmouth, and then he left and went to Old Dominion. Now he's obviously at Auburn. But yeah, Dean's had some assistants run through there.
That's awesome. And so you're mid-20s, and Pat Light is on your staff. You're coaching a first-round pick at very early in your coaching career.
Oh yeah, probably. If he had someone else, he probably would have went a lot higher than he did.
First round's pretty high.
But but that was my first. He was a freshman when I got hired there, so just lot of trial and error with him. Poor guy.
Oh, that's awesome. Is he a Jersey guy or a New York guy, or where's he from, Pat Light?
He's from the shore, so he went to Christian Brothers Academy High School. It's like 15 minutes from Monmouth.
Oh, that's awesome. And then how many years did you? One of my Mike Shawaryn might be my favorite college pitcher of all time, but maybe one of my second favorites would be Sean Jelly. How many years did you get to coach Sean Jelly?
I coached Sean for his sophomore and junior year, and then I was with Mike the whole time.
Yeah, that's great too. And both those guys pitch in the big leagues, correct?
Yeah, Sean's still up there. Mike got up and then had like shoulder and elbow surgery at the same time, and he's actually making a comeback. He pitched in indie ball and had a really good year, so he's trying to make a comeback now.
That's awesome. All right, cool.
Yeah.
I may have some coaching follow-up questions for you guys at the end, but I want to save time for this 07 season. So, like that's the scene, right? Louisville, you guys, Skylar, you've been there, and, no offense to Coach Prado, whose resume is spectacular, but you guys were kind of like, I would characterize you as maybe bottom half of Conference USA. You're making the transition to the Big East, and, that conference was, it's still a good baseball conference, but it was much bigger back then, and there's a lot of really good teams in there. So let's start here. You guys, Skylar, you're a fifth-year senior. Jimmy, you're a junior, but you're just getting there in January. So Skylar, you're going to have to take this part of it. And then Jimmy, anything that you feel free to comment on top of this. But I want to know about the fall, Skylar. Like Mac comes in with Chris Lemonis and Roger Williams. I mean, this all-star cast. Mac had a reputation because he had done so well at Ole Miss, but they hadn't actually been through to Omaha yet. They just had gotten really good really fast. But what was that fall like, Skylar?
Everything that was going on was entirely different. And the emphasis that was put on the weight room, we did a lot of things that were, I guess we subtracted things out, that we would do from just a conditioning or running standpoint. That was different for us. The style and the pace in which we practiced, the constant charting and competitive nature of everything that Coach Mack was doing was definitely different. You have such a brilliant, I think the best pitching coach in the world, and Roger Williams, that, his resume spoke for himself. You'd seen what he'd done at a multitude of places. And, you were kind of sitting there like, well, okay, this guy's really good. Like, is he going to give me all these golden nuggets? But you're kind of like, wow, coach doesn't talk much. I guess I got to wait for those nuggets. Right. And it was just a different feel across the board. Now, as someone who had been there and knew the history of Louisville, it wasn't as if, we were having conversations about, hey, this team is going to go to Omaha 9 months from now. That was not really the thought process. We had some guys that were out in 06, and we'd made a good run in our conference tournament. Myself, who, definitely participated a decent amount. Boomer Whiting, who, ends up stealing 73 bags and was a dynamic leadoff hitter and center fielder for us. And then Chris Dominguez, who was the highest rated recruit we'd ever got. All three of us had the medical redshirt in 06. And so we had some pieces back that, obviously were good. We had some young guys come in that you could tell were talented, but we also had a lot of players that just hadn't reached their peak. And so we knew that we were going to be good. We knew that we were going to be better. We knew we had a different feel, but you're going into, like we are right now in our worlds, where we're doing meetings with coaches and all that. And it was still a ton of unknown as a whole.
Yeah. All right. So Jimmy, here's a way I want to tee you up on this. So Mac is so dynamic, and like I think of guys like Mac, where you could install him as the CEO of Apple tomorrow and their stock would go up, right? Like I really believe that about Mac. Like he could do anything he wants. Like he was a math major at the Citadel. Right? It's like you have to be a rocket scientist to get that degree. And so he just chose college baseball. And then Coach Williams, I agree with what you said, Skylar. I mean, this guy, you look at his resume from a pitching standpoint, and it is nuts how good it is. He's also very intimidating. I used to be his peer, and then now I'm a member of the media, and I'm scared to go say hello to Coach Williams. I've known him for 30 years. It's like, why am I nervous around this guy? But he's the best. Like he's the best. So Jimmy, you come in, like, what? This is my question. What's the dynamic like? Because you guys are kind of playing for Coach Williams and Mac at the same time. What's that dynamic like, the two of them?
I think Skylar hit on the head. Mac was like super intense, vocal, competitive, and not that Raj wasn't, but Raj is just the very stoic and just doesn't say much, but is always watching, and was always watching at what everybody did. And when he spoke, it was like you really rabbit ears went up and you're locked in. So it was just very, very different approaches to the two of them. And it's funny. So with like Harry was saying, how he's intimidating. So in the fall, I took an official visit there. So Skylar is actually my host.
Nice.
On my official visit.
Well
and
done,
I remember sitting with Roger and I was getting ready to fly back. And I was terrified. Roger's like, so what are you going to do? And then he just sat there quiet. And you're just I guess I'm coming. I'm in.
Closed by fear. That works.
Yeah. Yes.
Oh, that's awesome. Hey, could you guys I feel like I know culture is a buzzword and it's kind of overused, but I do feel like that's a big part of the Louisville program. Just that Mac is going to coach everything and the baseball is going to take care of itself to a degree. Could you guys sense that right away, or was it more hey, I just know that there was a pace before and now it feels like we're going a million miles an hour?
Well, I think that, Coach Mack just made you believe that anything was able to be accomplished by just the way he would talk. Sometimes I'm sure there were certain players that were like, is this guy serious? Is he ever going to take his foot off the gas? How does he keep saying all these things? He is a master. And I think I certainly probably attempt to emulate this. There's only one person can do it as great as him, because I think he's the best motivator in college baseball. But he could really needle you about something, really needle you to a level that it probably very much annoyed the person, but it made you do something better, right? And I know Jimmy will know this, our Boomer, our center fielder who could run, and he was a very pretty guy and he was always done up and he didn't like to dive a lot, and Coach Mack, we'd go boat race somebody. I remember us beating Seton Hall on a Friday night, 16-1, and the 1-run score in the ninth. Boomer didn't lay out for a ball, and we're on the bus after, and everybody, you win 16-1 on Friday. That's a good feeling. And I just remember Coach Mack being, if only our center fielder would dive, we would get pitchers BP. And, you're like, wow, is he going? Is that where he's going right now while we're eating our Papa John's pizza on the way to the hotel? But he could do that, and then you would see, and there's famous catches that Boomer ended up making later. That's coaching, right? That's coaching. You can't be afraid to speak up. You can't be afraid to challenge. The way he does it, players I think it ends up resonating in a different way, because they know he's saying it because he knows you can be great, and he wants you to show how great you can be. He just articulates it in a different way.
Yep. Jimmy, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was going to say, I agree. I think what he does and what we were part of is just the environment he creates, right? I think culture is created, through environment over and over and over a number of years, and then the culture develops. And it was just always a constant environment of motivation, accountability. He pushed you in a lot of areas, not just on the field. There's one-liners and things that he would tell you. I still remember the things he said. It'd be the 3 things that change you from the person you are to the person you'll be 5 years from now: the things you eat, the people you hang out with, and the things you read. So he would there's just things that he would talk about that are outside of baseball. So like I said, just the environment he created with motivation, accountability, the structure, the competitiveness. I think that's how the culture was created, just because that's who he is. And it's just every year. And now it's just who they are.
Yeah, it's awesome. All right, so let's go to the season. So, you guys both had it looked like a team that had a lot of people that had a lot of big roles. Skylar, you won 9 games that year. Jimmy, you threw 59 innings that year. You guys played a ton of games. I think you played 73 games. It was a very full season. If I looked it up right, though, and Skylar, I'll start with you again, it didn't look like it started out awesome. I think you guys lost your first 2 weekends. I would imagine the Big East is a league that's tough to get your footing in because the weather is probably really uneven. But what do you remember about the kind of first part of the regular season?
Well, I think a lot of people remember our first game there was a shutout down at Southern Miss. We played well. Zach Pitts, who ended up, logging a zillion innings, was an All-American, had a great year, and it started off there. What I think many people remember is, our second game, and Jimmy, I'm sure, can remember this, and I don't remember the speaker's name, but Coach Mack played, before our second game, we're going to play Southern Miss. It's going to be a great crowd. And he played a video for us, a Muhammad Ali video, just talking about fighting. And he predicts all these things that are going to happen in the game. And talking about, Dominguez hitting a home run in the first, Boomer getting on base, and just all these things. And as Jimmy can confirm that this actually happened, Dominguez gets a 3-0 green light as a freshman, hits a home run at Southern Miss. We go through this game. I remember it specifically because it was my first game back in 2 years. I got to pitch, I guess it would have been the 6th and 7th inning, and it was a close game. So that was an exciting time, big atmosphere. We have a 5-2 lead, 2 outs in the 9th, and we end up blowing the game. And there was actually a brawl as the final, run scored. Some people on this podcast avoided suspension. There's another half, that may have unfortunately gotten wrongfully accused in this brawl. But, I think it set the tone for what Coach Mack, not the brawl. I know that that's what people talk about, but just the way we fight, the way we had each other's back, not literally per se, but that was a big moment. Like, that doesn't happen much. I'd never seen anything like that. And so there was an element, the way he handled that, where, hey, like, you got to understand, you got to fight, you got to do all these things, but there's a way we can corral this, right? And so we go through, and like you said, we kind of were up and down. What I always remember, it was a big turning point for us, was kind of in the middle of the year. I think we were about like 19-10, but we had West Virginia come in, and West Virginia had a good team, and we swept them in a weekend. And the last 2 games were particularly close, and it was good weather, and we had good, attendance. Like, it was kind of turning with the new stadium, or at least quasi new stadium. And so that kind of really got us rolling. We ended up, rolling Kentucky in a midweek the next week, and things kind of just got, going. And so therefore, I think it put us in a different headspace, that we knew if we could continue that, we'd have a chance to potentially get to the dance, which it got dicey there at the end, but we at least got our foot in the door, after the conference tournament in May.
Yep. Jimmy, so for Skylar, this is his 5th Division I season. For you, it's your first Division I semester. Like, I would imagine it's a lot to take in, and you don't have veterans that could say, hey, this is the way we do X, Y, and Z, because everyone's trying to figure out on the fly. What were, like, that first part of the regular season, what were things that really stood out to you?
Well, you just come from junior college, so just the structure, and the organization, and then really, you make the adjustment in talent, the talent level. So I'm coming in and, trying to earn a spot in January, trying to earn innings in January, and we were old, and we had some guys who had a lot of college at bats, so it was challenging, but it was fun. I didn't ever feel like I was. I kind of felt like I rolled right into it and was right a part of it.
That's awesome. Offensively for you guys, like Chris Dominguez and Boomer Whiting, obviously, like I remember those guys. I didn't realize Isaiah Howes had, like, his numbers were crazy. Like, was maybe this is, you could pass on the question if it really wasn't the type of offense, but was Isaiah kind of like the best player? Was he the catalyst of that offense?
He was the most explosive player, I would say. Like, he can run, throw, he had power. For me, the catalyst of our offense when we were going good, it was Logan Johnson. When he for me, he was like steady. You always knew what you were gonna get, always got big hits. I mean, he had I don't even know the number. Skylar probably knows how many hit by pitches that guy had in his career.
30 something, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it was, so for me, he was like the guy who always was like, when he was going good, we were going good.
Was he a holdover, Skylar Johnson, or had he been there?
He had. He was a year younger than myself, so that was in 07. He would have been. We were just, like Jimmy said, we were old, right? I mean, all those. Myself and Boomer were the 5th year redshirt seniors. And then the rest of those guys that you could name off, the Pete Rodriguez, Isaiah Howes, Logan Johnson, Chris Cates, Dan Burton, those are all older guys, and it ended up becoming an incredibly dynamic offense. And I think Coach Mack created that by the way that we just pressed people. I mean, we stole 153 bases. That's insane. And then, that team really got hot from an offensive perspective, and boat raced a lot of teams, just driving the ball out of the yard. And I know Dominguez was the most famous name, but Dominguez didn't get hot till the NCAA tournament. He had a really, a rough year. He was hitting 229 with 7 jacks going into the NCAA tournament. The numbers that you see there end up going, oh, that's pretty good. But he had really, really struggled. But when it was winning time, he was one of the best players in America.
And you said, go ahead, Jimmy. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say he had 5 homers going into the last game of the season at Cincinnati, and then he hit 2 and then hit 8 in the postseason.
Oh my gosh! And he was a redshirt freshman or something like that. He had been hurt the year before, Skylar.
He made a tag play down at FAU in 06 as he was kind of just snap tagging in. The guy was already. It was like a quick pop up slide, and he just slung his hand there real quick and broke his forearm. That was like game 4 or 5 of the year, and of course that put him out for the entire season.
Yeah, it's crazy looking at the numbers. You guys hit 78 home runs. A enormous number of home runs, and then still stole all those bases. It was, like you just wouldn't think to run that much when have that much power. But obviously, that's always been Mac's staple. Is it's going to be up tempo. Any game that requires patience would not be good for Mac. That would not be, that's not his, not his stick. That's awesome. Hey, let me do the pitch-logic read here, and then we will get to kind of the more postseason stuff. So second sponsor of the pod is pitch-logic. It's a system used by players, coaches, scouts, and instructors at all levels of play, from the youth leagues all the way to the big leagues. It's easy to use and affordable technology. It makes the platform accessible to every player at every level. All the metrics and features that are used in the big leagues at the highest level of our game. See pitchlogic.com for more information. That's pitchlogic.com for more info. Appreciate those guys very much as well. All right, so let's kind of start to get to the end of the season, and we're going to the postseason. What I thought was interesting, but I want to get your guys' perspective because you lived it. This is not now. Louisville's a program where you come down to the stretch run of a season, and most years, almost every year, they kind of you're in. It's just a matter: are we hosting? Are we not hosting? Are we a top 8 seed? Are we not a top 8 seed? That wasn't the Louisville that you guys were living in. You were trying to get the second bid in the history of the school. So, it looked like you guys got off to a good start in the conference tournament, and then Rutgers ended up beating you twice and winning it. Kind of take us there, Skylar. Really what I'm interested in is the end of the season, and then what was the selection show like for you guys?
I remember like it was yesterday. I mentioned Zach Pitts, buddy of mine. I still remember myself and a couple other teammates, Gavin Logston and Colby Warwick and some guys. We, like you said, we start off good in that conference tournament. We get us to 40 wins, and then we lose 2 in a row. And our flight was not till Sunday, and we had lost on Friday. And the coaches basically said, "Hey, you got to make the bus on Sunday that goes to the airport." And so I remember, I don't want to use you're in a dark place, but I remember just eating Chinese food for lunch, for dinner from the same Double Dragon place. Didn't want to leave the hotel. I thought it was probably over, right? That was what I felt. I know there's some other guys that did too. And maybe for me at that moment, I really didn't want that to be it, because I knew that we did have a good group, and I felt like we were deserving getting to 40 wins. But that was a really rough couple days. It was you were very antsy to get to that selection show, and I know Jimmy remembers how that selection show went. We were the last regional that was shown.
No way.
It was as scary a moment as you'll ever have, and in terms of sitting in that position. And so I still have a picture of hugging a guy I grew up with who was one of our managers from the Mason family, Jeff Mason. And I remember hugging him and everybody hugging one another because we were so just jubilant to get in there. And, Jimmy briefly, alluded to it earlier. I think that's what gave our team a freedom that I know a lot of teams don't know they're getting in, but our team, when you talk about playing with house money, we played with house money better than just about as good as anyone in college baseball, because we had older guys. We couldn't believe that we did get in. And I think that really helped us, as we headed out to Columbia for that regional.
Oh, that's awesome. Hey, Jimmy, so same question, kind of like the selection show and that moment in time. Were you guys in a public place watching it with fans, or were you guys it was just the team watching it?
Just the team in the clubhouse. We were just in the clubhouse together.
Yeah. So what was that moment like for you, Jimmy? Being your first year of Division I baseball, it must be wild.
I honestly didn't know what to expect. You know, I was just your first year, and Skylar had gone through it. However many years of college baseball before that, 4 years. So I was just kind of going with it. Honestly, didn't really know what to. I knew we had a good team. I thought we did enough, but you just don't know. But you get towards the end there, like your brain starts going down the. You got one regional left, and you're like, well, we ain't getting in. And then obviously it was they have some photos like Chris Cates, and obviously Chris is 5'3", and like him jumping off the ground, and it was really cool. But Skylar's right. It was like once we got in, it was like everybody was like house money. It was like we were just playing free.
That's awesome. All right, so you take this part, Jimmy, and then Skylar, you back them up on this. So now, like, you get in the jubilation. I would imagine it's one of those things where you can't even remember who you're playing because you're just so fired up about seeing your name up there. So now you're going to travel to Missouri, and this is the first time Missouri has hosted, but they're not a new kid on the block. This was that stretch where Coach Jameson had them going to 7 straight regionals. You had famous players like Ian Kinsler. Max Scherzer had just helped them get to a super regional the year before, but this is their first time to host. The other thing that's crazy about this, I had no idea, but Miami is in this regional, and Miami is carrying a 13-year regional streak, but not 13 years of going to regionals. 13 years of winning regionals. Miami had won their last 13 regionals, which doesn't even feel valid coming out of my mouth. Like that feels like Fantasy Island. But Jimmy, start us off there. Like, what do you remember about like kind of you travel to Columbia and then you get there and settling into that regional?
Well, yeah, you look at you get in, you're excited, and then you're looking at the teams, and obviously Miami sticks out just because of what the history of that program. But I remember getting down there, and it was during the time like they don't do it anymore, but you used to have like the regional, you'd have like a dinner, for all the
those
teams.
Are the worst. So
yeah, bad. Yeah. So you'd have like the dinner for all the teams. You remember getting the T-shirt with all the teams on it and the whole deal. But outside of that, scouting reports that in 2007 weren't really like a big thing. Like you'd get it from word of mouth, you know what I mean? You weren't getting video and this and that. Like you'd heard like they had this guy Aaron Crow, Missouri, who was a really good arm, and then you heard like the Yonder Alonso and all these guys on Miami, and they were physical. But the one thing I do remember, so how that regional started. So we're playing Miami game 1, okay, just to give you an idea of how free our guys are playing. Boomer Whiting was leading off for us. First, second regional in school history, 3-2 count, lead off a game, drag bunt.
No way.
Oh yeah, started off 3-2 count to start the regional. Yeah, and then we rolled them. We rolled them pretty good that first game.
Oh, that's awesome. So Skylar, you take it from there. So you guys, you beat Miami. I think you lost to Mizzou in game 2. Is that correct?
That's correct. I mean, I can speak to a little individual nature of probably the mental roller coaster. I remember telling our team about this last year, but we're playing Mizzou. We're up 3-0, and Colby Wark just kind of lost the strike zone there in the 6th, and they hit a couple jacks. The bases get loaded. I actually come in the game. We're up by 1, but it's bases loaded, no outs, and come in there, and I'm throwing 82 miles an hour, but we kind of navigate through, and the game stays at bay until the 8th. And then with 1 out in the 8th, I'd given up a solo jack. And I could not have pitched any better individually, but we ended up losing that game. And you're excited because you throw really well, but you also gave up the home run, the solo that kind of you feel like loses the game. And so I remember us going back to the hotel, and, I can be honest in saying this, I wouldn't have admitted at the time, but you're like, well, wow, is this like, I guess that's the last time I'm going to pitch maybe? I remember sitting there with my dad talking about that a little bit. We're at the hotel and we competed very well. It was an electric atmosphere, but you're sitting there going, okay, well, now we got to play Miami at 11. And then if you beat Miami, then you're going to play Missouri again. And you have to beat them not just once, you have to beat them twice. And so, it seemed like a bit of a daunting task, and it played some games with you mentally. But, I think that's where our culture probably was its maybe most shining moment, in what we did over those next 3 games out there in Columbia.
So how did the next? So take us finish the regional for us, Skylar. So you guys beat Miami,
We
and
beat
then
Miami. It's a back and forth, all hands on deck. We won an 8-7 game. Obviously tons of adrenaline. I remember, running from the bullpen. All of us were like, "Oh my gosh!" Like, I cannot believe we just won that game. We didn't realize the 13-year ramification. We just knew that's Miami. Like, you're not supposed to beat Miami twice in a regional.
right.
Doing it once and the way we did, 13-7, you're like, wow, that's pretty good. I think maybe one of the more famous, moments maybe in Louisville history probably ended up happening in that night game. We had a great battle. It was 2-2. I believe it would have been the bottom of the 8th, the way it worked with us being the home team. But 2-2 game, and Chris Dominguez, hits a ball down the left field line. It's, not the greatest lit place in the world out there in Columbia. And he hits it what seems like 500 feet, and it's in the air forever. And he stands at home for like 10 seconds because you're waiting to see, is it fair or foul? Is it foul? Is it fair? And they signal it fair, and Chris took a long time going around the bases. Immediately became public enemy number 1 there in Columbia. And the last inning we grind through, we end up holding them. We win 4-3. So we force the rubber game, and then we end up deciding about 45 minutes before the game that we thought, since they were throwing Aaron Crow and he was throwing 98, that we should start me coming back off after throwing a lot of pitches and not having a lot of velo. And Jimmy could tell you, I think I was throwing about 74, 76 for my inning that I skated through. And so we skate through the top of the first, and our offense that we spoke of earlier put up a 9 spot on Crow in the first inning, and we boat raced to that regional final 16-6. We beat Missouri. And so, what was kind of wild about that, and I know we'll get to obviously what happened next, but when you're up 16-6 and you're in the 9th, you have a pretty good idea you're going to win. And to do that, on another team's field was a pretty incredible thing. And, we'd had great battles with that team. I mean, 3 games in the span of probably, 30 hours. You're having to compete pretty hard. So to win that, and that bus ride back to Louisville was certainly a time none of us will ever forget.
So, and that was back in the format where it was, you would come back on Monday night to beat them, and you're going to play Crow, or you're going to face Crow, correct?
We did it midday. We played at noon. So we actually ended up getting back to Louisville in the, after our cold showers, after we won, we got to get back there late at night to Louisville.
Oh my gosh. Was Kyle Gibson on that Mizzou team too?
Yeah, he was a freshman. Yeah.
Freshman. Did you guys face, so you faced Crow, did you have to face Gibson or someone, or you had to face him too?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, that's crazy. All right, so Jimmy, you take us from here. So the bus ride back to Louisville, like, do you guys even? So you're trying to get your arms around what just happened. Do you know like who you would play, or what do you guys know at this point when you guys are you're busing back to Louisville?
We're on the way back. I mean, I think we were all just freaking jacked that we won. So we're all jacked up on the bus. But we knew that Oklahoma State was playing Arkansas to win that regional, and they were a 3 seed as well. So when Oklahoma State had won it, it was kind of like, okay, well, what's going on? Like, where are we going? Are we going to Oklahoma State or what? And I can remember being on the bus and coach telling the team, like, as we're riding back on the bus, that we were hosting, and the bus went absolutely nuts. That we were hosting the Super. Yeah, it was awesome. It was really cool.
That's really cool. Hey, who was the MVP of the regional? Do you guys recall? Like who?
Dominguez.
Oh, it was Dominguez.
Yeah, Dominguez. Yeah,
so
he went off.
Yeah, so you're like you said, Jimmy. Like he had 8 home runs in that several week stretch. So he was just leaving regularly at that point.
Yeah, he was. From there on in his career, he just was hot as can be.
That's awesome. He's like 6'5" too, and like physical, right? Like he's a monstrous human.
Yeah. He's actually the head coach at Bellarmine too.
That's right.
Yeah.
So he coached the kid for the D-backs, right? Like Brandon Fott. Is that how you say it?
Yeah, he was an assistant there. Yeah, at the time.
Oh, that's awesome. Very cool. All right, so Skylar, you're the right person for this. So now you guys are going to host a super regional at Louisville. You've never even hosted a regional at Louisville. Now we're just going to skip that part. We're going to host a super. What was that like?
It was probably the first moment that you ever felt at Louisville like baseball was important. And I don't mean that we had Tom Jurich loved baseball. Like, I don't mean it as from an administrative standpoint.
Right.
I mean it just people were prepared to see what is this? What is like people in Louisville know what baseball is, but what's a super regional, right? Like people in Louisville were more excited, years earlier when Chris Burke was playing for Tennessee in Omaha. Like people watched that, but
Right.
now like we're doing this, we're hosting, they're adding stands. We have to get rid of the Miller Lite tent because you can't have that during an NCAA regional. Like we have events going on at Louisville Slugger, downtown. Like you gained an element of popularity that you never had, right? We're there at Louisville during the Terrence Williams, Earl Clark, Francisco Garcia, Tequan Dean, Brian Brom, you name the Louisville athletes that were famous. Like we weren't getting the street cred and it was kind of our time, and not to put undue pressure on or anything, but we're, sitting there going, wow, this is going to be really cool. Hopefully we have the greatest crowds ever. And hopefully we just go do what we do. So that was kind of what the buildup was like heading into we had a Friday, Saturday, Sunday regional. What I always remember that was terrible was before the first game, we had a weather delay. And I remember thinking, is this going to mess up with the crowd? Like what's going to happen? And fortunately, Zach Pitts went out there and shoved, and we boat raced the first game of the regional 9-0.
That's awesome. So Jimmy, you've coached in a bunch of intense super regionals. I think about Kentucky in 2017. I think about those two super regionals when you guys were at Maryland and you had to play Virginia on the road both those times. How would you compare like being in a super regional as a player to what it's like as a coach?
It's way more stressful as a coach than it is as a player. Yeah. I mean, a player, you're just playing the game, you're just competing, as a coach now you just want to make sure that your team is prepared and you're not, you're putting those guys in the right position to succeed. So I think as a coach, it's a lot more, stressful than it is as a player. It was just, getting back to that house money. It was just like, we were just out there playing. It was fun.
That's awesome.
At no point during that whole entire run did I ever feel any sort of like our team ever feel any sort of pressure, like it's getting tight or anything through that whole entire run.
Yeah. So Skylar, you take it from here. So, but let me ask a general question too. So you guys won the first game. I think you lost the second game and you had to go to a game 3. Was there like a very direct formula for you guys? Like, hey, at this point in the season, like the way we're going to win is Chris Domingos is going to hit a home run, or Mark's is going to pitch great, or something like. Was it pretty specific, or was it just like, hey, we're playing with house money, we're hot as a pistol, and something's going to happen magical, and we're going to win this game?
Our offense just was really hot at that time. We were just swinging the bats really well. Our pitching was pretty consistent throughout the entire year. If you look at the stats, we didn't have a ton of arms. It was just we had the guys who we had, and we all threw. Like in that regional, I mean, we threw like we threw every day in that regional. Skylar, I think, threw like the day game and then warmed up for the night game. Like I did it, pitch against Miami, warmed up against Missouri that night. Like it was just kind of what we did. So our pitching was pretty consistent throughout the whole year. Like we weren't really shutting a lot of teams out, but you knew we kept guys in the game, and then our offense. That's kind of what we rode, through the postseason was our offense.
So you guys were not necessarily in set roles. Like it sounded like Zach Pitts was starting the first game of whatever weekend. Other than that, were the roles pretty fluid for you guys on that team?
Well, I would say this: they were fluid because we knew how we were going to handle winning time. Like Pitts and Marks were the guys.
Mm-hmm.
Then we knew that Wark was going to start the third game, but he was very limited. And then based on how the games were the day before, Jimmy or I would always piggyback, and we would just basically manage the game, hold the game, create an opportunity for us to win. And then we would pass the baton on to, Tristan Magnuson, who ended up pitching the big leagues, was a supplemental pick that year. It was basically Kyle Hollander, Gavin Logston through some short stints. Jimmy and I would prolong, and then Magnuson would close. And that was kind of the way it was 5 of us that threw, that's just basically what it was. And then we were really hoping that Pitts and Marks would be good. And thank goodness they were very often.
So Marks got beat by Oklahoma State. So they beat him, and then you guys are a little vulnerable going into game 3.
Well, we were one strike away from we were up 2-1 in the 9th inning. We had Tristan Magnuson on the mound. 2 outs, 2 strikes. The place is going bonkers. There's 5,600 people. We're about to go to Omaha, and I'm actually blanking on the guy who hit the ball, but they hit a ball to left. And, I think Jimmy's in the bullpen with me, if I remember this correctly, but we were down the left field line because we had to switch dugouts, just the way the thing worked. And the ball goes to left. You mentioned Isaiah House. He had like a over 40-inch vertical, and you see him jump, and he timed it, and you're like, oh my gosh, he's going to catch it. And he just doesn't. So we end up throwing Tristan at 5 or 6 innings. We lose in 13 or 14 innings, 3-2. So that's a tough feeling. Certainly wasn't maybe, to how we felt after we lost that game at Missouri. But it's also, you're lying if you don't have any doubts going, so wait, we were one strike from Omaha, and now we got to play a game to decide it. And, I know Jimmy and probably a lot of guys laugh, but I always I can do the Coach Mac pretty good. Coach Mac gave what I still would imagine if you put his foot to the fire, his most famous speech he ever gave us. I think it's a speech that probably parlayed what he's done at Louisville over all those years. But basically just it's not about the dad. I'll give you the cliff notes. He always talked about the Omaha picture up in his car, and he'd flip down the mirror thing and he'd look at Omaha, and he kept repeating. I looked at it every day, and he says it's all nonsense. He's like, you guys, no matter what happens, and then 45 minutes from now, you're the greatest Louisville team ever, which we were. It doesn't matter. It's about relationships. It's about people. He started breaking down. Other guys were kind of like, is it okay? I feel like I'm about to break. He goes just all into it and basically took the whole burden off. And we were probably the equivalent of a football team coming through, a crowd of like 95,000. And, we went out there and look, we won the game 20-2. Jimmy and I always like to joke we pitched pretty well in the game, but it wasn't that hard. It wasn't that hard. We did our parts. We got our name, the win column or pitch column or whatever it was, but we boat raced them, and it was a party from probably about the 5th inning on, because everyone knew it was ball game. Isaiah House hit a grand slam in the 8th to make it go from 16-2 to 20-2, and it was just basically a party from there on out.
That's awesome. Who was the MVP of the Super Regional, or who was the player that stands out? Was it Dominguez again?
I don't think it was me.
Steve Rodriguez hit 2 home runs in that. He hadn't hit a home run the whole year, and he hit 2.
No way.
Howes was good. Pitts obviously set the stage Friday. I don't know. We scored 31 runs that weekend, so we certainly were doing our job offensively. But I think we really were. I mean, we had great players, but I just think it was a constant revolving door of guys just constantly showing up, right? It's what Jimmy and I hope our teams do at Troy and Clemson, right? Like, we just showed up. Our guys did the job. We did not have mass numbers of pitchers. We didn't really care. We weren't like, well, hey, I'm an entity, I got to work. No, we just were like, let's answer the bell and pitch. Our offensive guys, they take their HBPs, they ran down the line fast, they stole, and they hit jacks. Like, it's just, that was our identity, and it certainly got us to Omaha, and we certainly had a heck of a good time winning a super regional in Louisville. I will tell you one thing, Roons, and this is no offense to any other city, but one thing Louisville does like to do is they will celebrate a winner. And so we got to realize what it's like to be the BMOX on campus for a little while, and we certainly had our fair share of fun there for that couple days or that week.
That's awesome. What I'm so glad you shared that thing about Mac giving that talk before Game 3. Like, I can see that. That is just amazing. So I want each of you guys to give me a reflection from that Omaha trip. So Jimmy, you go first. Like, whether it's just like being on the plane to go there, or like when you first arrive, or what's something that you like, a reflection that stands out from your trip to Omaha as a player.
Ooh, oh. Just, for me, I like the biggest thing, like when I think about it, was like when we first got there, and like you walk in, like right when you landed, they took us right over to Rosenblatt, and like it was just the colored seats at Rosenblatt were just like, they were so different than everywhere else, right? You had like the yellow and the red and the blue, And I remember just like being there, and it was just like you almost feel like you were in awe of the whole thing. And then the opening ceremonies, like, and just the whole, up into the game. Once we got to the games, it was baseball. But just for me, like, I just remember all the stuff prior to that.
Yeah, just the whole. I don't know. I always say it's like being a big leaguer for a player. Like it's incredible.
Yeah.
Same question for you, Skylar. What's a reflection you have from that Omaha trip?
I just think getting to see all those people that you had seen on TV and you realize you were on that same level, or at least being able to be talked about as a group, as a team. I remember going up to Kyle Peterson in the outfield in between throwing and saying, "Hey, I really like listening to you." And now it's like he's called games I've coached in, like, and actually conversed with the guy. Like, I remember, introducing myself to Erin Andrews. I know everyone always laughed about that, but I certainly had quite the crush on her at that time. So I had to make sure I introduced myself to her. And, I remember, like Jimmy said it best. I think there was some moments of you going over the hill into Rosenblatt when you can't see it. And then you go over the hill and you see the colored seats, you see, the LSU stand, even, there all the time. And just the mass amounts of people, right? Signing autographs for 2 straight hours after your, little 55-minute BP session that they give you the day before it starts. Like, you've never seen a line of people like that just waiting for your autograph. So a lot of the memories are the things that weren't on the field, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, and I think that's what probably makes it cool, because those really resonate, like in your brain. You can remember little nuanced things of them as time goes on.
Yeah. That's I said this on the last podcast, but every year broadcast, like doing the super regionals from the studio, I'm like half super sad, half like joyous, right? Because for the teams that are going, I know like this is going to be like there's no bad trip to Omaha. There's no such thing. It's and then for the teams that lose in a super regional, it's like your soul is crushed forever. Like you never get over that. So. But I love what you said. What you guys said. It's like you guys literally were the best team in Louisville history and Louisville baseball history, and you changed our sport, because Louisville went from like instantaneously. They went from a kind of like just a school with a baseball program to like a powerhouse program in our sport. And Mac's going to be a Hall of Famer. I mean, it's just incredible to think that it started with that group. So really cool. Hey, so let's wrap up with this, you guys. So I want to ask you about your current teams. I'm going to give you a player I want you to talk about. I also want you to add a player that people aren't talking about that we should be talking about. So for you, Jimmy, I'm going to start with you. So Cam Canarella is like, I mean, I couldn't have a more favorite player in America right now. Like, this dude is just a baller, and he's got big personality, and like that umpire that threw him out of the regional last year owes us all like a lifetime of apologies. I'm kidding, right? Like, sort of kidding. But like, he's just awesome. So I want you to tell us about Cam Canarella, because I feel like I've seen him play. I love his game. I don't know him that well. And then give us another player on Clemson's 2024 team that is under the radar but shouldn't be under the radar.
Cam is probably the best skilled baseball player I've ever coached, positionally. He, like, just to give it, like, last year he came in as a shortstop, and so we had Will Taylor, and we needed someone to go out to center field. Will couldn't play to start the season. Will was going to play to start the season. He had some knee injuries coming back from football, so we needed a center fielder. And literally a week before the season, we're like, "Cam, you ever play center field?" He's like, "Nope." So we put him out there, and he's making over-the-shoulder catches, Willie Mays catches, doing everything, and he exudes in a crazy amount of confidence. So just a perfect example is today. So we have game 3 of our fall super regional. We call it our fall super regional, and his team is down 4-3, last inning, 2 outs, and he proceeds to hit a 2-run go-ahead homer. That's just kind of who he is. He's on the barrel with every swing. He's a special baseball player. And then the guy that nobody's talking about, people know about, but he had a great fall and a great summer. That he's going to have a huge role on our staff is Tristan Smith, left-handed pitcher. He was a highly rated guy out of high school, very, very talented, and he's made the progressions that you'd like to see out of a guy who can be a frontline ACC guy.
Yep. He was more of a bullpen arm last year, correct?
Yeah, pitched in a lot of high leverage situations for us as a bullpen guy.
I feel like getting back to Cam for a second. I think he's from the Carolinas. I don't know for sure. He's from the South somewhere. I think he feels like he should be from Long Island, Jimmy. Like he's a Northeastern guy that he was just raised in the South. I don't know. Maybe his personality is not that way, but he plays like a Northeasterner.
He plays like that. His personality is not like that. He is a man of very little words. He off the field, very soft spoken.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. I love him even more. So, Skylar, I'm going to make you talk about Shane Lewis. I love it. He hit 27 bombs last year, and he's a guy that really had to, bounce around trying to find the right opportunity for him. Like, he's the example of where the transfer portal can be really, although he's not really a transfer portal guy because I think he did JUCO in between. But, hey, finding the place where you can really become the best version of yourself and then bets on himself to come back. Like, I love that. Yeah, tell us about Shane Lewis and then another guy that of your choice.
Yeah, we love that he bet on himself and came back too.
Yeah.
In our Fall World Series when he hit a ball 450 feet, we were certainly a huge fan of that. Shane's just a special talent. I mean, you don't see switch hitters with, high level juice from both sides. He's a really good runner. He has a special twitch in his bat that you just do not see very often. His year last year was you could not have asked for more. Setting a school record for homers, to be an All-American, newcomer of the year in the Sun Belt, player of the year in the Sun Belt. No one had done that in over 20 years. Just an outstanding kid, very humble, does not like all of the acclaim, right? Like his teammates love it way more than he does, but that's okay. That's part of his DNA. And so we're really lucky he's back, and yet I think there's things in his game that he knows he can improve, and he's working hard to do them, and hopefully he can showcase that on a national stage in 2024. I think a player that I guess there's a lot. We really like our team, but I think Gary Gaines missed last year, having elbow surgery, but was freshman of the year in this league in 21 before we got here. Second or third in the league in all pitching statistics in 2022, our first season. Gary's got the furthest extension in college baseball, fastball up to 96. He's 6'4", 220. He looks the part. He's a great competitor. Unicorn fastball, his off speeds had really developed prior to injury, and I expect it to be just as good as he gets back. I think he's going to be a major X factor for our team. I think he's a high level professional. I think he's going to pitch in the big leagues. He has something unique, but he also competes at an elite level. And so he's one that I think won't get talked about because sometimes guys get lost in the shuffle when they're injured and people kind of go, oh my gosh, I forgot that Gary Gaines is a superstar. And I think people get to see that, especially as he gets, kind of his sea legs coming back this spring.
That's awesome. Really cool. I knew the time would go very fast, and it did. I really appreciate these, you guys. I mean this sincerely. When people ask questions like, "Hey, who are the best pitching coaches in college baseball?" Your two names always come up, and you guys are so well respected in our profession. And Tyler, now you're on your head coaching track, and Jimmy, if that's what you want, that's down the road for you as well. But it's so individually, you guys are so well thought of, and I personally feel that way 100%. But then to know that you guys share this experience in common, and I think about this time of year in 2006, no humans outside of Louisville, Kentucky, were talking about the 2007 Louisville baseball program. No one was. I mean, maybe like if you're a complete junkie, you're talking about, oh, Dan McDonnell, I wonder how he's going to do at Louisville, but nobody knew, obviously Coach Williams was maybe more famous than Mac. And, we kind of barely knew who Chris Lemonis was, but that team that you guys were on literally made history. And now all the tributaries and your guys' careers are part of that. So it's just so cool. And I loved hearing the stories. I told you guys, the play-by-play guy for Louisville forever, Sean Moth, who's one of the just all-time great humans that you get to interact with in our sport. Texting with him today was, I wish I could have verbalized the text thread. That was so absolutely fun. So I appreciate this. This has been really fun. Thank you guys for indulging me on that.
Awesome. And the other last thing I'll say is, and I could speak for Skylar too, is like that whole staff. What's unique is like we have a lot of guys that we played with that are in coaching, and guys that have been there since we've been gone that are in coaching. I don't know if Skylar would be doing what he's doing if that staff didn't come in, but I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing if I wasn't with that staff. And the way that we coach, I'm sure, the foundation of what we learned from Raj is still part of what Skylar does, just like it's probably part of what I do. And the things that Mac taught us in the recruiting and motivation, things that Lamona's taught us on how to recruit, like all those things that we learned from that staff are all in all of us, that are in coaching still. So those guys were a huge part of everything. And for me, it's why I'm doing what I'm doing. It's the opportunity that I got from those guys.
Yeah, love that. Very cool. Boys, this was so great. And I'm so glad to hear I'm not the only one intimidated by Coach Williams. That makes me feel really good.
Yeah. Get in line.
Yeah, he's this. Now I know why it is though, because he doesn't want to talk. He wants to just do things. And so for me, I'm going to ask him to talk. So now it's all coming together. So really, really appreciate you guys. This is great. Good luck this year. For everyone listening, this is the last episode of Sunday Night Conversations, but the podcasts on the D1 Baseball Network keep coming. And that's it. Everybody have a great holiday if we don't talk to you. And we will catch you next time on the D1 Baseball Podcast.